Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, in middle of Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Hay. In my print, we are 5 lines off the bottom of the page in the Mishnah Berurah. The words Imahaya b'Motzai Shabbos Yom Tov, and it's right by the Ois Cotton Yud for the Shar Hatzion in the Mishnah Berurah. As I'm recording this share, the news just broke that it seems that Eretz Yisrael has launched attacks on Iran. So, as I say in the beginning of every share, our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakim Yirachem Alehem V'Yetziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'Oira Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala Uvizman Kariv and Emar Amen. Our learning should be a schus for everybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way, b'chol makom shehem, whether in Eretz Yisrael or outside of Eretz Yisrael, in the air or on the ground. The Rebbeinu Shalom, b'schus the Torah of Klal Yisrael, b'schus the tefillos of Klal Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over all of our people everywhere where they may be. Okay, so yesterday we learned in the Mechaber the Shitas HaMechaber. We're going to see later in today's shir that this is actually a machlokes based on a machlokes Rishonim. But we learned the Shita of the Mechaber if somebody goes ahead and cooks on Shabbos. So somebody is over the Yisur Daraisa of Bishul on Shabbos. What is the status of that food? So the Mechaber told us that for the Mevashel, for the one who cooked the food is going to be Aser La'olam. That food is going to be Aser forever. The one who actually did the bishul is not going to be allowed to derive benefit from that food forever. As far as anybody else, the food is Aser on Shabbos because nobody is allowed to have Hana from that food that was cooked be'Isser on Shabbos itself. But immediately after Shabbos, the food is going to become mutter for everybody other than the mevashel, the one that cooked it. That's the Shitas HaMechaber. But one thing that we take away from this, according to the Mechaber, is that on Motzei Shabbos, the food becomes mutter for everybody else except for the one who cooked it. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out an interesting exception to that rule. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Imahaya b'Motzei Shabbos Yom Tov. Let's say Yom Tov is on Sunday and Monday. Okay? So you have Shabbos. Shabbos was Erev Yom Tov. Sunday is Yom Tov Rishon. Monday is Yom Tov Sheni in Chutz La'aretz. So Imhaya b'Motzei Shabbos, Yom Tov. Motzei Shabbos is Yom Tov. Now Reuven went ahead and cooked b'mezid on Shabbos. All right? So we've said the halacha that, all right, that food is going to be also to Reuven forever. But for everybody else, the food becomes mutter on Motzei Shabbos. But now, Motzei Shabbos is Yom Tov. That changes the equation, says the Mishnah Berurah. Imhaya b'Motzei Shabbos Yom Tov, if Motzei Shabbos happens to be Yom Tov, then afilu bishel beheter, kegoin shebishel b'Shabbos l'chayla. Then, even if a Yid would have gone and cooked on Shabbos afternoon, not be'Isser, he did it beheter. What's a case where you cook beheter on Shabbos? You have a chayla sheyesh by sakana, and he needs cooked food. So you went and you cooked on Shabbos beheter for the needs of the chayla. But if Motzei Shabbos is Yom Tov, even if a Yid cooks beheter on Shabbos, forget if he cooks behisser, even if he cooks beheter, the food is not going to become mutter on Motzei Shabbos. Not for the mevashel, not for anybody else, but not because of the knas that we've learned about previously. The food is going to be aser on Yom Tov Rishon for a totally different reason. B'kol makom aser lebari gam b'Yom Tov Rishon. That food is going to be aser for any healthy individual. It'll be mutter for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. But for any healthy individual, that food is going to remain osir, not only on Shabbos, not only on Motzei Shabbos, but it's going to be osir for the entire first day of Yom Tov, the entire Sunday, the entire Yom Tov Rishon. Why? Because of a halacha in Hilchas Yom Tov, which is the Ein Shabbos Meichin L'Yom Tov. There's a different halacha on Yom Tov, and that is that on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to eat food that was made on Shabbos. When you want to eat something on Yom Tov, it has to be that the food was prepared during the week. Food that was prepared on Shabbos cannot be eaten on Yom Tov. The Ein Shabbos Meichin L'Yom Tov. Because you can't eat food on Yom Tov that was prepared on Shabbos. So again, this has nothing to do with the knas that we were learning about, that when you cook food on Shabbos, it's also for the mevashel forever. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're not allowed to derive hana on Shabbos from food that was cooked be'isser on Shabbos. It has nothing to do with that. In the context of Hilchas Shabbos, this food that was cooked on Shabbos afternoon is going to become mutter la'acherim. It's going to become mutter for everybody else other than the mevashel on Motzei Shabbos. But in the context of Hilchas Yom Tov, it's not. Because now Sunday is Yom Tov, and you want to eat food that was cooked when? It was cooked on Shabbos. That would be a case of Shabbos being meichin, preparing for Yom Tov. You can't do that. So you can't eat that food now on Yom Tov Rishon. Now, how about Yom Tov Sheni? Are you going to be allowed to eat that food on Monday? The answer is yes. On Monday, Yom Tov Sheni, that food will be mutter. Why? Because of a memonavshach. Let's remember, if in Chutz La'aretz Yom Tov is on Sunday and Monday, why do we have 2 days of Yom Tov? We have 2 days of Yom Tov because of Sveika D'Yoma. We're not sure which day. We're not sure about the calendar. We're not sure about Rosh Chodesh. So we're not sure which day is really Kodesh and which day is really Chol. So now let's do the math. If Sunday is the real day of Yom Tov, so okay, the food is Asr on Sunday because it was prepared on Shabbos, and Ein Shabbos Meichin L'Yom Tov. So all right, we already said that on Yom Tov Rishon, the food is Asr. But now let's take a look at Yom Tov Sheni. If Yom Tov Sheni, if Monday is not really Kodesh, if Sunday, Yom Tov Rishon, was the real day of Yom Tov, so then Monday is not Yom Tov. Monday is really Chol. Monday is really a weekday. Then you have no problem eating this food. You're allowed to eat food on a day of Chol. On Monday, you're allowed to eat food if it was prepared on Shabbos. So in the context of Hilchas Yom Tov, you have no problem. In the context of Hilchas Shabbos, you have no problem. So if Monday is not really Yom Tov, if Monday is really a day of Chol, no problem. Now let's say Monday is the real day of Yom Tov. Let's say Monday is Kodesh and Sunday was Chol. Well, in that case, you're not eating food that was prepared on Shabbos for Yom Tov. No, this food was cooked on Shabbos, and the next day, Sunday, was a day of Chol. Because you're telling me that really Monday, really Yom Tov Sheni was the day that was Kodesh. Well, if Yom Tov Sheni was the day that was Kodesh, then Sunday was Chol. We kept it as Yom Tov, but only because it's Sveika D'Yoma. Really, it was Chol. So then that means that the food was cooked on Shabbos, and then you had a day of Chol. So this is not a case of Shabbos being meichin for Yom Tov. No, the hachana was done on Shabbos, the food was cooked on Shabbos, and then you had a day of Chol on Sunday, and you could have eaten that food on Sunday. Now it happens to be Monday, it happens to be Yom Tov. But this is not a problem of Shabbos being meichin L'Yom Tov. So therefore, what we come out with is, if the food was cooked on Shabbos, and Yom Tov is on Sunday and Monday, so the food is also on Shabbos, because it was cooked by a Yid on Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos, it really should become mutter la'acherim, because it becomes mutter right after Shabbos is over. But now it doesn't, because of Hilchas Yom Tov, Ein Shabbos Meichin L'Yom Tov, so the food is going to be usher on Sunday, it'll be mutter on Monday. Next halacha that the Mishnah Berurah gives us is a halacha in bittul. Says the Mishnah Berurah, how about somebody, Ruvain went and he grilled the steak be'isser on Shabbos afternoon. All right, so now this steak is usher. Im nisarev b'Shabbos oisei davar shenispashel b'mezid ba'acherim. Let's say the food that was cooked on Shabbos afternoon, be'isr, got mixed in to other food that was not cooked on Shabbos afternoon. So you have a food item that was cooked on Shabbos afternoon, so it's aser. It got mixed into other like food items that were not cooked on Shabbos. Those are mutter. So here you have a taruvis of iser in heter. You want to apply bittul b'roiv. You want to say that the food that was cooked on Shabbos afternoon should become bottle in the majority of food that is mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Das HaMagen Avram, it's the opinion of the Magen Avram, the Einoim is bottle, that this food cannot be bottled. Why? And on Shabbos, all of the food is going to remain aser because it can't be bottled. Why? Because we're saying now that the food that was cooked on Shabbos afternoon, it's aser to the mevashel on Shabbos, it's aser to everybody else on Shabbos. But on Motzei Shabbos, it's going to become mutter for everybody else. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Mikri davar sheyesh lo matirin, the ein batla afilu be'elef. This becomes what we call a davar sheyesh lo matirin. This is something which is aser right now on Shabbos, but several hours from now on Motzei Shabbos, it's going to become mutter. And there's a halacha in Hilchas Bittul that says, a davar sheyesh lo matirin, something which ultimately is going to become mutter with the passage of time, is not bottle even in 1,000. Even against 1,000 items the same, it's not going to become bottle. Why? Because why should we apply bittul and make it mutter using the mechanism of bittul? Let's wait several hours and it will become mutter by itself. It's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. So a davar sheyesh lo matirin, I feel be'elef ain't a bottle. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Masha Kasab Yerdei, Seif Sibid Kuf Beis Hipuch there. Even though in Yerdei Kuf Beis it seems to say not like this. Nitchak Magen Avram Liyashvai. The Magen Avram works very hard to reconcile this. V'ayin b'Chavis Dasham Shechelik Alav. The Chavis Das disagrees with the Magen Avram. V'chol zeh, but however, this is where it gets a little complex. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'chol zeh lahamavashal ba'atzmai. The whole question, right? Again, let's analyze the case. Reuven cooked something on Shabbos afternoon. All right? Reuven cooked something on Shabbos afternoon. That food is aser. Right now on Shabbos, it's aser to everybody. It's aser to the mavashel. It's aser to lacherim, according to the mechaber. Right now, it's aser to everybody. Now, it got mixed in to a majority against it. You want to apply bittul. Says the Magen Avram, you can't apply bittul. Why can't you apply bittul? Because it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Why is it a davar sheyesh lo matirin? Because the status of this food is going to change on Motzei Shabbos. On Motzei Shabbos, this food, which right now is aser to everybody, on Motzei Shabbos, it's going to become mutter la'acherim. So Motzei Shabbos, it's going to become mutter, at least la'acherim. So therefore, it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Since it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, it's not bottle, afilu be'elef. But we see over here a machloikis. We're not sure. The Magen Avram says it can't be bottled because it's called a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Other people say, no, it could be bottled. We don't look at it like a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this whole machloikis, whether or not you're going to call it a davar sheyesh lo matirin, v'chol zeh lahamavashel ba'atzmai. It's only a question in the context of the one who cooked it. What the Mishnah Berurah is saying is like this. We have to look at this food that was cooked in Shabbos from two different perspectives. We have to look at it from the perspective of the mevashel, the one who cooked it be'isr on Shabbos, and we have to look at it from the perspective of acherim. So let's do this one at a time. From the perspective of acherim, you're right, it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. Right now on Shabbos afternoon it's aser, but Motzei Shabbos it's going to become mutter. So from the perspective of acherim, it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. And since it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin, it's not batal afilu be'elef. And therefore, it got mixed into other stuff on Shabbos afternoon. Sorry, Charlie, it's not batal. It's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. But now let's look at it from the perspective of the mevashel. From the perspective of the mevashel, once he cooked that food item be'isr on Shabbos afternoon, it is aser to him forever. Is it ever going to become mutter? No. It's not going to become mutter on Motzei Shabbos. It's not going to become mutter 6 months from now. So from the perspective of the mevashel, it is not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. And since it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin, it should be batel b'roiv. Comes out a very interesting thing. It comes out that in the context of bittul, this food item is actually more chamor to the acherim than it is to the mavashel. If he cooked it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, and now you want to apply bittul at 5 o'clock Shabbos afternoon, so for the mevashel, for the one who cooked it, you could apply bittul b'roiv. Because why not? It's iser beheter, it's batel b'roiv. Of course, you have to meet all the other requirements of bittul. We're not going to learn Gans Hilchas bittul now. But at least in theory, as far as the mevashel is concerned, this item that he cooked on Shabbos afternoon, which is also to him, if it fell into other food of heter, it could be batel b'roiv. Why not? So, okay, it fell in, it becomes batel, now he can eat from the mixture. But from the perspective of acherim, they can't eat from it. Because for them, it's not batel. Because for them, it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin on Motzei Shabbos. So don't apply bittul, wait till Motzei Shabbos and eat it then. Fascinating piece of Mishnah Berurah. Okay, now finally we're going to go weiter in the Mechaber. So we're here on Kuf Lamed Gimel, Amud Aleph, the bottom line, right near the end of the line, the word ubeshoigig. Okay, so yesterday we learned the halacha. What happens if a yid goes ahead and cooks something bemezid on Shabbos? And again, sorry to be so repetitive, but Shitas HaMechaber is Reuven cooked something bemezid on Shabbos afternoon. It's also to him forever. It's also for acherim until Motzei Shabbos. But immediately on Motzei Shabbos, right after the Zman, it becomes mutter for acherim. That's if Reuven cooked bemezid. But what if Reuven cooked b'shoigig? Says the Mishnah Berurah, u'b'shoigig. If Reuven, a yid, cooked food b'shoigig on Shabbos, aser by b'yoyim gam la'acherim. On Shabbos, it's aser for everybody. Because Lamaisa, it was something that was cooked be'isser on Shabbos. And you're not allowed to derive benefit from something that was cooked be'isser on Shabbos. So on Shabbos, it's aser gam la'acherim. V'lo erev, but Motzei Shabbos, mutter gam loy, it becomes mutter even for the mevashel miyad. It becomes mutter immediately. Okay, let's see the Mishnah Berurah, turning back to Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. For one word, Mishnah Berurah is cut in vav, ubishoigeg. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what constitutes shoigeg? Says the Mishnah Berurah, shogag bedin. It could be that the person thought that the cooking was mutter. Why did he think it was mutter? Because he didn't do a good job learning Hilchas Bishul. And therefore, he made a mistake in halacha. So that's the shoigeg. He thought it was mutter because he made a mistake bedin. Oy, shokach. Or he forgot that it was Shabbos. Or he forgot that there's an Isser of Bishul on Shabbos. So he went there and he cooked. Kol zeh b'chlal shoigegu. That's all called shoigeg. Ois cotton zayin. The Mechaber said that the Yid cooked it b'shoigeg on Shabbos. On Shabbos itself, it's also to everybody. Gam la'acherim. It's even usher for other people, other than the one who cooked it. Now the Mishnah Berurah brings down a very yesodistic machloikis over here in the Gemara, and a machloikis rishonim when it comes to this whole question of what's the halacha when a yid cooked something on Shabbos. What's the halacha if he did it b'mezid? What's the halacha if he did it b'shoigig? We learned now the Shitas HaMechaber. We don't see the Ramah doesn't come here and argue on the Mechaber, so all we know from Shulchan Aruch is the Shitas HaMechaber. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he's cutting zayin gam la'acherim. Hinei ba'Gemara. If you take a look at the Gemara Chulin Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph, pligi be'inyan shoigeg u'mezid. We have a machlokes on what the status of the food is, depending on whether it was cooked by a yid on Shabbos b'shoigeg or it was cooked b'mezid. We have a sheet of Reb Meir and we have a sheet of Reb Yehuda. V'das al Shulchan Aruch hu das Reb Yehuda. The Shita Sabachaber that we have learned over here is the Shita of Reb Yehuda. Shekenis kibu harifa harambam v'haga'onim. The Mechaber is paskening like Reb Yehuda because he does what he usually does. He's following the Rif and the Rambam, and also the Go'inim also agreed with this Shita of the Rif and the Rambam. So the Mechaber is paskening like Reb Yehuda. A Yid cooked it b'mezid, it's also to him forever. It's also for acherim until Motzei Shabbos. He cooked it b'shoigeg, it's also for everybody on Shabbos. It becomes mutter for everybody, even for the mavashal, immediately on Motzei Shabbos. That's the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, and that's the psak of the Rif, the Rambam, the Goinim, and the Mechaber. But now we're going to see an alternate opinion. V'agra hiski b'bi'ura l'shitas ha'toisvis v'siyatom. The Gra seems to follow the Shita of Tosfos and other Rishonim that agree with Tosfos. The Pasku Kerebi Meir. They paskin like the Shita of Reb Meir in the Gemara in Chulin. What's that Shita? De b'mezid, if the Yid cooked the food b'mezid on Shabbos, aser bein loy, bein la'acherim, ad Motzei Shabbos. Reb Meir holds, if a Yid cooked b'mezid on Shabbos, that food is aser to everybody for the duration of Shabbos. But when Shabbos is over, it becomes mutter for everybody. So again, Rabbi Yehuda, the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, says a Yid cooked b'mezid on Shabbos. It's also for the Yid, for the one who cooked, for the Mavashal. It's also forever. It becomes mutter la'acherim Motzei Shabbos. Rabbi Meir is more makel. He says a Yid cooked b'mezid on Shabbos. It's also to him and to acherim for the duration of Shabbos. But right after Shabbos, it becomes mutter even for the mavashim. Ubishoigeg, and if he cooked it b'shoigeg, mutter gam loy miyad. If you cooked b'shoigeg, it's never aser. It's mutter even on Shabbos if it was done b'shoigeg. And says the Mishnah Berurah b'makom hatzorich, in a case where there's a need, in a makom hatzorich, yesh lismay chalzeh b'bishul b'shoigeg. You could rely on this opinion of the Gra in a case of shoigeg, where the food could be mutter even on Shabbos. Somebody has a shayla halacha l'maisa when it comes to bishul on Shabbos. If bishul was done on Shabbos, they should ask a shayla because it's complex. It depends on the specifics, Isurei Daraisa, Isurei Darabanan. So if a shayla comes up halacha l'maisa, a shayla should be asked to a competent Rav. Okay, let's go to the top line, Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis, words of the Mechaber, of the Ramah. Says the Ramah, V'im amar le'enu Yehudi lasek shloim halacha b'Shabbos. If somebody transgressed the halachas of Amir la'akum, and he asked an Einu Yehudi to perform malacha for him on Shabbos, Ayin La'el, Siman Shin Zayin, Sif Chaf, we covered those halachas of Amir la'akum. We kind of opened up Chele Gimel with Amir la'akum, the very complex halachas of Amir la'akum, Ayin La'el, Siman Shin Zayin, Sif Chaf. Okay, moving along to Sif Beis, says the Mechaber. A little complex over here. We just have to follow the math. So we're going to read a nice piece of Mechaber, and then we'll go to the Mishnah Berurah. We just have to halt cup. You just have to follow over here. Says the Mechaber. Hashoichet b'Shabbos l'choila. If somebody shechts an animal for a choila, sheyesh by sakana on Shabbos. So to shecht an animal is certainly an issa daraisa on Shabbos. It's the av malacha of netilas neshama that we've learned about already previously. So to shecht an animal on Shabbos, issa daraisa. But you have a choila sheyesh by sakana. To shecht for a choila sheyesh by sakana, even if it's a suffix pikuach nefesh, is mutter. So that's what somebody did. Ruvain shechted an animal Shabbos afternoon for the needs of a choila sheyesh by sakana. Okay. Hashoichet b'Shabbos l'choila, says the Mechaber. Now, we're analyzing what the halacha should be now. We just learned Sif Aleph, that if somebody cooks something on Shabbos, he's over the Issa Daraisa of Bishul on Shabbos. So we have to look at the food. The food becomes Aser. We have this whole question. Depends. He did it b'mezid, he did it b'shoigeg. Is it Aser to the Mavashal? Is it Aser to Acherim? But in the whole Sif Aleph, we're busy dealing with the status of the food that was cooked b'Isser on Shabbos. Now we have what seems at face value to be a similar case. Somebody performed the Issa Daraisa of Shchita on Shabbos. Now, he did it for a Choila Sheish by Sakana. So what he did was mutter. Now we want to look, what's the status of the animal? Certainly, the meat could be prepared and it could be eaten by the chayla sheyesh by sakana, that's what you did it for. But how about for other people? Could other people partake of this meat that was shechted on Shabbos afternoon? That's the question that the Mechaber is dealing with. So says the Mechaber, Hashoichet b'Shabbos l'chayla, somebody shechted an animal on Shabbos for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Says the Mechaber, Bein shechala me esmail, whether this ill individual was already ill before Shabbos, Bein shechala hayom, or if this ill individual became sick on Shabbos, he was not sick before Shabbos, and we will see shortly why this should matter. But, says the Mechaber, in either case, mutter habari lechol mimenu chai b'Shabbos. Any other yid, a healthy, perfectly healthy yid, who certainly you're not allowed to shecht for him on Shabbos, anybody could go ahead and eat this meat on Shabbos if they eat it raw. Well, how else are you going to eat it? They can't cook it. It's Shabbos, right? You can't go put up a whole big meat stew for the chayla sheyesh by sakana and then let other people eat it, because the cooking that you're going to do for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, you're only allowed to cook what you need for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. So you can't go make a big party and grill, grill 13 rib steaks off the rib and dole them out to everybody. You're only allowed to cook for the chayla. You're not allowed to cook for everybody else. So says the Mechaber, you shechted an animal. It's a deraisa, the tils the shama, on Shabbos afternoon, but you did it for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. The meat, technically, is mutter to anybody if they eat it raw. So the shechting that you did, when you shecht, you make a cut in the neck of the animal, it renders all of the meat on the animal, it renders it all kosher, right? So any of that meat could be eaten raw. It doesn't become usser because it was shechted on Shabbos. But it's only if it's eaten raw. Contrast that, says the Mechaber, Avol HaMevashel. But if somebody cooks on Shabbos, Oy Asa Shar Malacha, or he does any other malacha for a chayla sheyesh by sakana on Shabbos, so Avol HaMevashel Oy Asa Shar Malacha l'chayla, if somebody cooks food, or does any other malacha for a chayla sheyesh by sakana on Shabbos, Aser b'Shabbos, the benefit of that malacha is aser on Shabbos, lebari, for healthy yidden, oil chayla she'ein by sakana, or to another chayla, but he has the flu. He's a chayla she'ein by sakana, it becomes aser. Why? The chayshinan shemeyarbe b'shviloi. A new problem. If somebody goes ahead and cooks a big meat stew on Shabbos for a chayla sheyesh by sakana, nobody's allowed to partake of that food other than the chayla sheyesh by sakana. And why is that? Because of a problem, an isid derabanan. Because again, technically, what was wrong with the cooking? You cooked for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Now, like I said, certainly there's no shaila that you can't go ahead, take the whole rib of the animal, cut it into 13 rib steaks, and go grill 13 rib steaks, even though you know that the chayla is only eating one. Then you're not grilling for the chayla, right? You grilled one steak for the chayla. The other 12 you did to make a party. There's no question on that. The question is like this. The question is, the chayla sheyesh by sakana needs a soup. Now, the chayla sheyesh by sakana is going to eat a half a bowl of soup. But you can't make a half a bowl of soup. There's no way to make a half a bowl of chicken soup. You need to make at least a small pot of chicken soup. So you went ahead and you cooked up a small pot of chicken soup for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. Now, is somebody else allowed to have some of that soup? Well, it was cooked beheter. It wasn't cooked be'isr. So really, the halach of Sif Aleph doesn't seem to apply. We're not talking here about food that was cooked be'isr. We're talking about food that was cooked beheter. Yet the halacha, says the Mechaber, is nobody other than the chayla is allowed to partake from that food. You know why? Because of Gzeir D'Rabbanan. What's the Gzeir D'Rabbanan? The chayshinan shemeyarbe b'shviloi. We're afraid, if the halacha is going to be that if you make a small pot of chicken soup, then other people are allowed to eat from that soup also, then what might happen is, when you go to the kitchen to make the soup for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, You'll take out a 3-quart pot, and then you'll say, once I'm making the soup, let me make a 5-quart soup. Because there's other people in the house too. You might be marbe bishviloi. You might add more food to what you're cooking for other healthy people. And to do that would be an issa daraisa. And therefore, the Chachamim said, you cooked for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. The food is mutter for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, but it's also to everybody else. And now, let's be very clear before we even go into the Mishnah Berurah. We saw 2 distinct halachas over here in the beginning of Sif Beis. The first step over here was you shechted for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. You did shchita for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. You have a whole animal worth of meat. You have an entire animal of meat. Said the Mechaber, another Yid could go ahead and take some of that meat and eat it if it's raw. He can't cook it, he can't grill it, but he can eat it raw. Once you shechted the animal, the whole animal is kosher. If another Yid wants to go eat some of that meat raw, he can go eat it raw. You cook a chicken soup for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. The chayla sheyesh by sakana can eat the soup. Nobody else can eat the soup. Why? Din derabanan. If we're going to let other people eat from that soup, we have a problem. Shema yarba bishviloi. That problem doesn't exist by shchita. What are you going to say? You're going to say that if we let other people eat some of the raw meat of the animal, shema yarba bishviloi? There's no such thing as doing shchita on only a little portion of meat. There's only one way to do shchita. You need to do shchita on the entire animal. So there's no shash of shema yarba bishviloi. There's no such thing as shechting for a kazayas, right? The shchita affects the whole animal. So there's no room for gzeir d'Rabbanan. And therefore, if another Yid wants to partake of that meat, he can partake of that meat. But he'll have to eat it raw because there's no way to cook it. So the only way he's going to be able to eat it is eat it raw. That's what we're seeing over here in the Mechaber. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now, the Mishnah Berurah made a very interesting statement in the beginning of the Sif. He said, it doesn't matter if the chayla was ill before Shabbos or he became ill on Shabbos. How does that make a difference? What's the difference? Why would I think that there should be a difference? The answer lies in Hilchas Muktzah. Why? Because think about it this way. Let's remember, going back to the days when we were learning the halachas of Muktzah. Muktzah is the opposite of Muchan. Muchan means something is prepared for Shabbos use. Muktzah means you are maktzit midaitoi. It's set aside. This is not something that you had any reasonable expectation should be usable on Shabbos. And therefore, it is muktzah. Okay, when you have a cow walking around on Shabbos, right? Well, we know you're not allowed to be mishtamish b'bal chai. You're not allowed to use an animal on Shabbos, right? Now, that cow is walking around on Shabbos. Is it muktzah or is it muchan? Well, it doesn't have any use on Shabbos. You can't eat that cow on Shabbos. You know why? Because shechita is asur on Shabbos. So that cow is completely muktzah. You never had any havamina that you were going to be allowed to eat that meat on Shabbos. So now, let's plug that into our shiloh over here. Let's say you have Ruvain is the person who's sick. Ruvain took ill on Shabbos. Erev Shabbos, he was fine. He was perfectly fit and fit like a fiddle, however the saying goes. He was perfectly healthy on Erev Shabbos. He took ill on Shabbos. Now that he took ill on Shabbos, you have a heter, you're allowed to go shech the animal, and you're allowed to use the meat. But what was the status of this meat Bein Hashmashos Friday evening when Shabbos came in? At that point, did you have any havamina that you were going to use this meat on Shabbos? No, because you're not allowed to shech on Shabbos. So when Shabbos came in, Bein Hashmashos Friday evening, this cow was muktzah. And migui dis katzoi lebein hashmashos is katzoi lekula yuma. Really, this animal and all of its meat should be muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. Now, that's not going to stop you from shechting it and preparing it for the chayla sheish by sakana. Muktzah is it is a Rabbanon. Shchita and Tils Teshama is it is a Daraisa. You're allowed to shech the animal for the Chayla Sheish by Sakana. You're certainly allowed to be metaltal the Muktzah meat for the benefit of the Chayla Sheish by Sakana. But it does make a difference for everybody else. The Mechaber is telling me over here that when you shech the animal on Shabbos afternoon, any Yid who wants could go take a piece of meat and eat it raw. So that means that it's not muktzah. Now wait a second. If the person took ill on Shabbos, why isn't that meat muktzah? It was muktzah ben hashmashos. Why was it muktzah? Muktzah machmas isser. It was usher to be eaten ben hashmashos when Shabbos came in because it wasn't geshachten. And on Shabbos, you're not allowed to shecht it. So it should be muktzah. So how could you tell me that any Yid could go take a piece of raw meat and chew it? Now, if the person was ill already before Shabbos, if he was ill on Friday afternoon, you don't have this shaila. Why? Because if Reuven was already a chayla sheyesh by sakana on Friday afternoon, or he was at least ill, and you knew that there's a very strong possibility that he might become a chayla sheyesh by sakana on Shabbos, so then you already had a havamina that you might have to shecht an animal on Shabbos because you might need it for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. In that case, it wasn't muktzah ben hashmashos because you weren't maktzeh it midaitoi. You weren't separated mentally from this meat when Shabbos came in. You knew when Shabbos came in by ben hashmashos Friday evening, you knew that there was a possibility that you might have to do shchita Shabbos afternoon and you might have to prepare meat for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. So then it wasn't muktzah. This is what the Mechaber is telling me in the beginning of Sif Beis. He's telling me you should know. If you had to shecht an animal on Shabbos afternoon for the needs of a chayla sheyesh by sakana, any Yid is allowed to go ahead and use that meat on Shabbos if he wants to eat it raw. The shchita that you did on Shabbos is not going to aser the meat because the shchita was done beheter for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. And muktzah is not going to aser the meat. And muktzah is not going to aser the meat even if this person wasn't sick before Shabbos. Muktzah is still not going to aser the meat. Now, the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us why, but I'll give you a heads up. Why doesn't muktzah aser the meat? The answer is because we paskin like Reb Shimon. We paskin like Reb Shimon, who says that when we're dealing with something that is aser because of muktzah, when Shabbos comes in, but you know that there's a possibility, or even if you don't know, if it becomes mutter during Shabbos, we say that we don't apply unless you actually did something biyadayim to make it muktzah before Shabbos started. So I'll contrast two cases for you. Let's say you lit a candle in a beautiful silver candlestick before Shabbos. Okay, you light a candle. The candle's going to burn for 3 hours. While the candle is burning, the candle is muktzah. The candlesticks are muktzah. Why? Because the flame is muktzah. The candle is a basis to the flame. The candlestick is a basis to the candle. So while the candle is burning, everything is muktzah. But you know that the candle is only going to burn for 3 hours. And when the candle goes out, really there's no reason that the candlestick should be muktzah. It's not a basis anymore. Yet, we paskin, migudis katzoyle ben hashmashos is katzoyle kulayuma. And the candlestick remains aser for the entire Shabbos. Why? Because in this case, when you lit the candle before Shabbos, you were maktzeh the candlestick biyodayim. You did a maisa to make the candlestick muktzah. Since you did a maisa to make the candlestick muktzah, it remains muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. That's one case. But now we have a different case. Our case of the animal. The animal was muktzah at ben hashmashos. Why was it muktzah ben hashmashos? Because it's a live animal. It's not geshachten. The meat is aser. But it could become mutter on Shabbos. If you shech the animal beheter because you need it for a chayla sheyesh by sakana, it becomes mutter on Shabbos. In this case, we paskin that if it does get shechted on Shabbos, the meat is not muktzah. You know why? Because even though you're right that it was muktzah during Ben Hashmashas, you weren't maktzah it biyadayim. You didn't do an act to make the animal and its meat muktzah. It was muktzah. All right. But now that it's geshachten, it now has a Shabbos use. It's now ready to be eaten raw. So now it's not muktzah. This is what the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah's Kotches. Boy, a little complicated here. So the Mechaber told us that if you shecht an animal on Shabbos for a chol sheish by sakana, anybody is allowed to use that meat. They could eat that meat raw. And it doesn't matter whether the individual was sick before Yom Tov or not. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we allow anybody to eat the meat, even if the person only became sick on Shabbos and he wasn't sick before Shabbos. And that's because we do not say that the meat is muktzah. This katsoi ben hashmashos machmas iser shchita, even though it was muktzah ben hashmashos Friday evening, because you can't check it, right? And at that point, this person wasn't sick. So you had no havamina that you were going to go ahead and use the meat on Shabbos. We still don't say that the meat remains muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. Why? Because we pass it like Reb Shimon, who holds that in a case like muktzah machmas iser, we do not say migu diskatzer lebereshmashis iskatzer lekuliyuma, unless it's something like a candle and a candlestick where you did a maisa to make it muktzah. But over here, you didn't do a maisa to make the animal muktzah. Vayin oid bebeis Yosef. Ois cut test. Mutter habari. Anybody is allowed to go eat this meat raw, even a healthy individual. Hatam. The reason is because you shechted the animal beheter. You shechted the animal for a chol sheish by sakana. So you shechted it beheter. You only need one portion of meat for the chol sheish by sakana. But the only way you could render that meat kosher is by shechting the entire animal. So the entire shechita is considered to be done beheter. The shechita, as it applies to the entire animal, is considered to have been done beheter, because you need to do a shechita that applies to the entire animal in order to have kosher meat for the chol sheish by sakana. And we're not going to answer this meat like we do by bishul. By bishul, we can apply an issa d'Rabbanan, that the soup is usher to anybody else, because if we're going to say it's mutter to other people, you might cook more soup for the other people as well. Ois cut yud, the Mechaber said that this meat could be eaten raw. Chai b'Shabbos, it could be eaten raw. Ubeloi malicha. Sticks in the Mishnah Berurah. Not only does it have to be eaten raw, you're not allowed to do malicha. You're not allowed to kasher the meat. Why? The asur l'mloyach b'Shabbos, because you're not allowed to kasher meat on Shabbos. Kashering meat is the isser of meleach, which is part of the av malacha of ma'abed. When you tan hides, you salt them. Salting meat looks like salting hides. So salting meat on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do. So yeah, you shechted the animal on Shabbos for a chol sheish by sakana. You want to grab a piece of meat, you want to eat it raw, you're allowed to. You can't cook it, you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. You also can't do malicha. You can't kasher it, because you're not allowed to do malicha b'Shabbos. Okay, now you're all looking at me, and you're saying, well, if you can't do malicha, if you can't kasher it, how are you going to eat it? The answer is, v'hadacha boi mishun dam be'en. You have to wash the meat off, because the meat has surface dam on it. You need to wash off the surface dam, but you still are allowed to eat it raw without doing malicha. Masha'enke dam habalua boi. The purpose of kashering, the purpose of malicha, is to draw out the blood that is absorbed in the meat. Now the truth is, dam is only asur when it's dam haperesh. It has to be dam that moved out of its place. When you shecht and you have raw meat and you cut off a piece of raw meat, the surface meat, the surface dam, you're not allowed to eat, because that's dam haperesh. It exuded, it came out of the meat. It's dam haperesh, you're not allowed to eat it. So you need to wash it off so there shouldn't be any surface blood. But the blood that's still absorbed in the meat, to take that meat and chew it and eat it raw, that wouldn't be an isser of dam, because that dam is not dam haPeirish. So that you would be allowed to do even without malicha. Mashake dam habeluabai leka isser calls man shalei pirish. It's not dam haPeirish, it would be mutter. Ice cutting Yud Aleph. So till now we were talking about if you shechted on Shabbos. But if you cooked on Shabbos, then said the Mechaber, also b'Shabbos, if you cooked chicken soup on Shabbos for a chayil sheish by sakana, nobody else is allowed to eat from that soup. Avo b'motzoi Shabbos mutter biyad, but it will become mutter immediately upon Motzei Shabbos. V'loi be'inon lozeh b'chtei sheyaseh. You don't have to wait k'dei sheyaseh after Shabbos is over. And this is like we explained yesterday. There's no need to wait b'kdei sheyaseh only when a goy does malacha. Because when a goy does malacha on behalf of a yid, we're worried that amira la'akum, people are going to look at it as being kal, so we put in a knas. You're not allowed to eat it until b'kdei sheyaseh. So you shouldn't come to ask a goy to do malacha for you on Shabbos. Over here, the shechita was done beheter. For a chayil sheyesh by sakana, the bishul was done for a chayil sheyesh by sakana. You're allowed to eat the food right after Shabbos. If you're making the chicken soup for the chayil sheyesh by sakana, and you need to taste it, right? Really, for you, it's aser. It's only mutter for the chayil. But if you need to taste it to see if you put in salt or not, mutter gam b'Shabbos, that's mutter even on Shabbos itself. Now, you made the chicken soup. It's aser for anybody other than the chayil sheyesh by sakana. It's even aser for another chayil, if that chayla is a chayla she'ein by sakana. Because he's the same as a healthy person in the context of this halacha. Because a yid wouldn't be allowed to cook for him. He's a chayla she'ein by sakana. I lost the place here. So you have a chayla sheyesh by sakana in the house. You made chicken soup for him. If we're going to let the other chayla she'ein by sakana eat from it, you might come to add an extra piece of chicken for the chayla she'ein by sakana, which would be an issa daraisa. Ice cut yud gimel. This issa darabanan is because of the fear sheba yarbe b'shvilai. You might add food to the pot for other people. Lited basar l'saych hakdera. You might add meat to the pot for other people. V'zehu issa daraisa kishemarbe b'shvilai. To be marbe, to add meat to the pot for anybody else, is an issa daraisa. And says the Mishnah Berurah, this would be an issa daraisa. Afilu hu marbe b'pamachas koydem sheyiten akder ala eish. In other words, you might look and you might say, what's the worry over here? I'm making a pot of chicken soup for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. You're afraid I might be marbe. I might add to the pot for other people that are not a chayla sheyesh by sakana. And you're telling me to add to the pot would be an issa daraisa. Well, let's do the math. What am I really doing? To take a 3-quart pot that I need for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, to put in 2 quarters of chicken for the chayla that I need to do for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, to put in 2 carrots and a potato and an onion for the that I need to do for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. You're telling me that that's all mutter, right? Because it's for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. So let's say instead of putting in 2 fetlach of chicken, I put in 3 fetlach of chicken, right? Was there an issa daraisa involved in dropping the extra quarter of chicken into the cold pot that's not on the fire? That's not an issa of bishul. So did I do an issa daraisa over there where I took an extra quarter of chicken, an extra chicken leg, and I dropped it into the cold pot on my kitchen countertop? Did I do an issa daraisa? I didn't do an issa daraisa. So when did I do the issa daraisa? When I pick up the pot and I put it on the fire? But when I pick up the pot and I put it on the fire, I need to do that for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. So where is the point where I did an extra issa daraisa for somebody that's not a chayla sheyesh by sakana? That's what the Mishnah Berurah is dealing with over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you should know it's an issa daraisa. Afilu imhu marbe pam achas koydem sheyiten akder aleish. Even if you fill up the pot at one time, So I'm putting in 2 quarters of chicken for the chayla sheish by sakana. Instead of putting in 2, I'm putting in 3. But I'm doing it all at one time. It's still an issa daraisa. V'yesh there are those that disagree. To have a derabanan kevichu b'pamachas. There are those that say it's very hard to pinpoint over here where exactly you did an extra issa daraisa on behalf of somebody who's not a chayla sheish by sakana. They say in issa derabanan ayin beis Yosef. He quotes over here that Magen Avram, Vayin B'Sifri Avos Chesed Perek Zayin Shabirar Nurayim and Gemara the Ikar Gedei Rishona that it is an issa daraisa. Ois Cotton Yudalid Aser B'Shabbos. The chicken soup. Did I do this yet? Yeah. So the chicken soup. No. No, I didn't do this yet. We're going long. We're going overtime. It's very complicated, but I'm going to go weiter because I want to push through, at least through the end of Sif Beis. Says the Ramah. Hagah, 4 lines down. Va'afilu bishel al yedei eino Yehudi. Even if cooking was done through the agency of an eino Yehudi, Aser b'Shabbos, that food is Aser on Shabbos. Ois Cotton Yudalit, Aser b'Shabbos, lebari lehanois mimenu. So in other words, you have a live-in, an eino Yehudi, and the eino Yehudi cooked for the chayla sheyesh by sakana on Shabbos. That food is still going to be Aser to anybody else on Shabbos. Avu b'motzai Shabbos mutter miyad, but on Motzei Shabbos is going to be mutter miyad. You don't have to wait kedei sheyasa. So again, over here, the cooking was done by an eino Yehudi. Now, normally when an eino Yehudi cooks for a yid on Shabbos, you need to wait until after kedei sheyasa on Motzei Shabbos for that food to be mutter, right? Because we're afraid. Amir la'akum, it's going to become kal. Another Shabbos, you're going to ask a guy to cook for you. But over here, the guy cooked for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Since the guy cooked for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, the food is aser on Shabbos to anybody else other than the chayla sheyesh by sakana. But on Motzei Shabbos, it's mutter biyad. You don't have to wait b'kdei sheyasa. Why? Because l'maisa, this cooking is heter. Because it's being done for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. V'taimai the kevada any Yehudi bishul beheter, because it's for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Loy boy lahamtin b'kdei sheyasu. V'gam loy gozru b'zeh b'shu b'shulei any Yehudi. Also, there's no din of bishul akum. If the eino Yehudi did it for a chayla sheyesh by sakana, there's no isser of bishul akum. Okay, let's go a little bit weiter. It says the Rabbah 5 lines down, middle of the line. V'im katzat peiros min ha'mechuber l'chayla b'Shabbos. Let's say you have a chayla sheyesh by sakana who needs an apple. So you went outside on Shabbos and you plucked an apple from the apple tree for the chayla sheyesh by sakana. It's a daraisa, toilish, right? So you went and you did it as a daraisa for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. You plucked an apple from the tree. Afilu halacha yechayla miba'od yom. In this case, we're going to have a muktzah problem, right? Let's remember, an apple on a tree is muktzah on Shabbos. Why is it muktzah? When Shabbos came in at Ben Hashmashis, that apple is muktzah. Why is it muktzah? Because it's muktzah machmas iser. You're prevented from using that apple on Shabbos because you're not allowed to pluck it off the tree on Shabbos. So if the apple is attached to the tree on Shabbos, it's muktzah for the duration of Shabbos. Now, you're plucking it off the tree because you need it for a chayla sheyesh by sakana. So you might think to draw a comparison over here. Hold it. We said that when you shech the animal for the chayla sheyesh by sakana, muktzah is not a problem. Why? Because even though it was muktzah by Ben Hashmashis, right? But still, it became ois muktzah on Shabbos when it got shechted. We paskel like Reb Shimon, you weren't matche it biyadayim, right? So it becomes mutter on Shabbos. The muktzah falls off, and now any yid could go chew a piece of that meat when it's raw. Okay? Now we're plucking an apple off the tree on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, in this case, there's a muktzah problem. Says the Ramah, in this place, there's a muktzah problem. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, ois cotton yudalid, ois cotton tezvav, mi ba'od yom. This is true even if the chayla was sick already before Shabbos, which is a mitigating factor in Hilchas Muktzah. Because l'chayri, you could make an argument, I wasn't maktzeh b'yadayim the apples on the tree. I knew that there was a chash that I might have to pick an apple on Shabbos for the chayla sheish by sakana. Yet, there's still a muktzah problem for anybody else to eat from that apple. Why? Even though this individual was ill before Shabbos, so there already at least was a havamina that you might have to pick an apple on Shabbos, there's still a muktzah problem. Why? Because over here, the fact that you had a havamina, that you might need the apple on Shabbos, cannot mitigate the muktzah Shabbos. You know why? Shehu gadil v'holich b'Shabbos. Because the apple continues to grow on Shabbos. So when you pick the animal on the apple off the tree on Shabbos, there is apple over there that didn't even exist before Shabbos. But if you have apples that you know for sure, it's already late in the season, you know that even though they're still on the tree, they're not growing anymore. But if somebody became sick on Shabbos, also we could unload, we could get rid of the muktzah problem because of bittul. Why don't we say that the minute amount of the apple that grew on Shabbos should be bottled b'roiv? Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Siv Kimmel. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. This list of Limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua Sefuros Parnasat Sheduchim to all those in need. And the Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael B'chol Makom Shehem. Rabbi Yisai, it's a time for tefillas. Be well.